Wall Street set record closing highs on Monday as stimulus prospects and ongoing vaccine deployment boosted investors' optimism over the pace of economic recovery from the recession. Telsa said on Monday it had invested around $1.5 billion in Bitcoin and expected to begin accepting payment for its cars and other products with it in the near future, prompting a big jump in the electronic currency. Freed from his daily obligations at Amazon, Jeff Bezos is set to focus on his rocket business, Blue Origin, according to industry sources. These and more on TFT News. I'm Mike Wallace, and this is TFT News. Britain's envoy said on Monday that it had submitted a request for a special session of the UN Human Rights Council to address the crisis in Myanmar, where the military seized power a week ago.
Britain's envoy said on Monday it had submitted a request for a special session of the UN Human Rights Council to address the crisis in Myanmar, where the military seized power a week ago. Myanmar's new military leader said on Monday the ruling junta would hold a fresh election and hand power to the winner, saying that campaigning in a vote last November had not been fair. Police warned protesters to disperse or face force to stifle the demonstrations against the coup. Ambassador Julian Braithwaite told an organisational meeting of the Geneva Forum that it was making the request together with the European Union.
Madam President, we must respond to the calls of the United Nations Secretary-General, who has condemned the actions of the Myanmar military and called on its leadership to listen to the will of the people and to refrain from violence and to fully respect human rights and fundamental freedoms. We must react to the calls of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, who has expressed her grave concern about the removal of the civilian government and the arbitrary detention of dozens of political leaders, human rights defenders, journalists, activists, and others by the military.
The United States Embassy in Myanmar said on Monday it had received reports that a curfew had been imposed in the country's two biggest cities, Yangon and Mandalay, after a third day of big protests over last week's coup.
Wall Street set record closing highs on Monday as stimulus prospects and ongoing vaccine deployment boosted investors' optimism over the pace of economic recovery from the recession.
Investors drove the major U.S. stock indexes to record closing highs Monday. They scooped up economically sensitive energy, materials, and financial stocks on optimism that fiscal stimulus prospects and vaccine deployment would give a boost to the pace of the economic recovery. Pence Wealth Management Chief Investment Officer Dryden Pence.
You have a lot of people that have excess cash around, and that's beginning to fuel this, and the expectations of further stimulus is moving cash and liquidity into the market.
The Dow and S&P 500 rose 0.75%, extending their winning streaks to a sixth session. The Nasdaq rose nearly 1%. Oil prices rose to their highest level in over a year, fueling stocks like Chevron and ExxonMobil. Tesla's $1.5 billion investment in Bitcoin turbocharged the price of the digital currency. That, in turn, pushed up shares of cryptocurrency miners Riot Blockchain and Marathon Patent Group roughly 40%. Meanwhile, the fourth quarter reporting season has passed the halfway mark, and most S&P 500 companies so far have beaten consensus estimates, according to Refinitiv. Walt Disney, Cisco Systems, and General Motors advanced Monday ahead of their earnings reports this week.
Clothing retailers in Europe and America sit on excess inventory and have cut back on spring orders. That's leaving garment factories in Bangladesh fighting to survive.
The global apparel industry is reeling from a punishing 2020, and hopes of recovery have been punctured by a new wave of lockdowns. Clothing retailers in Europe and America sit on excess inventory and have cut back on future orders. That's left garment factories in Bangladesh struggling to survive. Some major retailers remain swamped by last year's clothes, which would have been sold off in clearance sales in normal times. British chain Primark told Reuters it was housing around $205 million worth of 2020 spring-summer stock, and even more from its autumn-winter collection. In an indication of the scale of the backlog, consultancy McKinsey says the value of unsold clothing worldwide ranges from $168 to $192 billion, more than double normal levels. Britain's Marks & Spencer and Germany's Hugo Boss said they'd placed smaller orders than usual for this year's spring collection. And the pain is flowing to major manufacturing centres like Bangladesh, where the economy relies on textile exports. 50 factories surveyed in Bangladesh said they had received 30% fewer orders than usual this season. With store closures threatening to carry into the summer, some retailers are attempting to sell off as much of their excess stock as possible. Last year was dire for the clothing industry. It saw sales slide by around 17% versus 2019. And the future remains uncertain. There are some bright spots though. Pyjama sales have seen a major boom as people stay home. But that's little solace for many makers. While demand for comfy loungewear may be high, pyjamas and onesies aren't enough to keep the world's clothing factories busy.
Freed from his daily obligations at Amazon, Jeff Bezos is set to focus on his rocket business, Blue Origin, according to industry sources.
A new space race is set for blastoff. But this time it's not America versus Russia, it's the world's two richest men going toe-to-toe. Industry sources say Amazon founder Jeff Bezos is set to focus more on his Blue Origin rocket business, with a view to putting progress into hyperdrive. The space launch company has fallen far behind competitor SpaceX. It's run by arch-rival Elon Musk, now the only man richer than Bezos.
Ignition and liftoff.
Blue Origin was beaten to billions of dollars in US contracts by the Tesla founder's firm. Now Bezos may have the time to change that. Last week he said he was stepping down as boss of the online giant to focus on personal projects. That's sure to include Blue Origin, which he has called his most important work. Bezos has been liquidating $1 billion of his Amazon stock every year to fund the project. Now the focus is NASA's planned return to the moon. Blue Origin hopes the space agency will choose its design for a lunar lander. Winning is seen as critical to the firm's credibility and its prospects for eventual profitability. But time is tight, with NASA due to winnow the list of possible contractors down to 2 by the end of April. Whatever happens, in the longer term, Bezos is thinking bigger, way bigger.
So my long-term prediction, and this is going to take hundreds of years, so don't worry prematurely, Earth will end up being zoned residential and light industry. And all the heavy industry will be done in space.
That is for the future, though. Right now, there is a space race to be won, and neither Jeff Bezos nor Elon Musk is known to enjoy coming second.
Police fired a water cannon at protesters in the Myanmar capital on Monday as tens of thousands of people joined third day of nationwide demonstrations against the military's removal of elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi a week ago.
Police in Myanmar's capital fired a water cannon at crowds of protesters on Monday as the third day of nationwide unrest raged on. Protesters in Nay Pyi appeared to have been hurt when they were knocked to the ground. Police then appeared to stop when demonstrators offered them branches and flowers as a symbol of their peaceful movement. Tens of thousands of people across the country have joined demonstrations against the military-led coup last Monday, which resulted in the removal of elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi. The nation's youth have banded together with university professors, Buddhist monks, and healthcare workers to organize what they call the civil disobedience movement. Protesters on Monday carried signs reading "Our Rights" and "Save Myanmar, Reject Military Coup."
We health workers are leading this campaign to urge all the government staff to join the civil disobedience movement. Our message to the public is that we aim to completely abolish this military regime, and we have to fight for our own destiny.
Protests over the weekend were the biggest since the Saffron Revolution in 2007, which ushered in a series of democratic reforms. Unlike protests then, this year's demonstrations have remained peaceful. But late Sunday night, a convoy of military trucks were seen passing into major city Yangon, raising fears of escalation. Reuters has been unable to contact the military junta for comment on the protests. Meanwhile, the United Nations and Western countries like the U.S. and Australia have called for Suu Kyi's release and the restoration of democracy.
Tesla said on Monday it had invested around $1.5 billion in Bitcoin and expected to begin accepting payment for its cars and other products with it in the near future, prompting a big jump in the electronic currency.
Bitcoin got a jolt of confidence from Tesla. The electric car maker said it invested $1.5 billion in the electronic currency, driving it up more than 15% to a record high. Tesla also said it expects its customers will be able to use Bitcoin to buy its cars and other products in the near future. Analysts say the company's investment could prove to be a game changer for Bitcoin. While central banks have been skeptical of digital currencies, some big financial institutions like BlackRock and PayPal support them. Bitcoin, which has set new record highs in recent months, has had a roller coaster ride over the past decade. But Tesla CEO Elon Musk has endorsed Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies in the past. Just last week, he said Bitcoin was on the verge of being more widely accepted among investors. In December, he asked if it was possible to do large transactions with it.
And those are the latest from around the world. I'm Mike Wallace, and this is TFT News.